Hello, welcome to NX After Dark. Today I'm going to show you a new plugin called nx-dotnet. It's created by this gentleman. Let's see if I can find his name. Gregory Coppola. He posted about it in the Narwhal community Slack. And at work we use .NET a lot. And of course I think it's very interesting because I use NX. So I was excited to see how this works. Also, since NX 12, a new API came out. It's called something like the Project Graph API. And it's a way for so that NX plugins for other languages than JavaScript and TypeScript can easier plug into the, what's it called, the dependency graph of NX. So today we're going to generate a workspace, an NX workspace. We're going to use nx-dotnet, and then we're going to set up a CI workflow using GitHub Actions. Let me find my screen and then we'll get going. So first thing we need, there's a few prerequisites here. There's, of course, Node.js. And then there's the .NET CLI, so you need to be able to run the .NET command like this. And I have a version 5 or so. So make sure you have .NET in your path variable, and you should be good to go. And let me just check. Yeah, I have Node as well. I don't know if the latest NX 12 supports Node 14. But I'll stick with 12. That's definitely supported. So yeah, that's it. Well, other than that, I also use pnpm. So that should be in my global path as well. It's like yarn and npm CLIs and package managers, but a lot faster, both locally and then the CI server. So that's why I'm using that, just to speed things up. So yeah. First thing we need to create NX Workspace. We need to have that available globally, and that could be done, for example, by saying pnpm install global create NX Workspace, and I have that. And as soon as you have that, you can say pnpm init NX Workspace, and then the name of it. So it'll be, let's call it nx-dotnet workspace. And then we can add some options, for example, PM for package manager, for package manager, and we'll set that to pnpm. And then we need an npm scope. That will be, I don't know, let's call it Lars. And I think that's what we need. We'll disable NX Cloud, and we'll use a preset, and I think it's called empty, like so. That will generate just a workspace with tooling and no projects. Yeah, this should be it. And while that's working, I see a question here in the chat. Hey, Nick, you're asking if I will be discussing how to have multiple Docker images. Well, I don't know what's the context of this question. If it's about GitHub Actions, no, I won't be discussing container GitHub Actions, at least not today. And nx-dotnet is for enabling .NET projects in NX workspaces. Okay, so we have a workspace code, nx-dotnet workspace. Yeah, let's see what we have. See what we have here. I'll try to zoom in. How is this? Like so. I have to zoom in a lot because I don't have HD streaming. So hopefully this should be great for viewing. Okay, let's see what we got. We got some NX commands and all of this. We got the CLI and its dependency tau, the NX, the NX Workspace API, node types, dot environment, TS node TypeScript prettier. Multiple Docker files for my NX environment. Well, I don't really use Docker for anything, basically. So I'm not sure what you're used to using Docker for. And Sebastian is saying you tried PNPM and it's buggy sometimes with NX. I haven't found an issue directly related to NX and PNPM. I have seen an issue with Azure pipelines and PNPM unrelated to NX. I was unable to figure out how to cache its store folder, its global cache of PNPM. That didn't work on the Azure pipelines, maybe because we were using a Windows server. Oh, and that reminds me of something. So is this multiple Docker files? Is that what you mean, Nick? Are you talking about in a CI workflow using different images for commands? Because you can do that for a GitHub action when you have like a GitHub action that you can pass input parameters to and maybe get some output. And for the individual steps of a GitHub or each job of a GitHub workflow using GitHub Actions, it uses an image, but it's not any arbitrary Docker image. It's only the ones that are provided by GitHub, and that's similar to Azure pipelines. So there's one for Ubuntu, or there's one for each long-term support version, and there's one for Windows. There's even one for Mac on GitHub. So that's pretty nice. And Sebastian is also asking, does the nx-dotnet plugin support the dependency graph? Yeah, it does, and we'll see that very soon. So yeah, this was what I was talking about in the beginning. NX12 has this dependency graph API that plugins can use so that they can generate the dependency graph based on the source code, just like NX does on its own for TypeScript and JavaScript projects. But yeah, the author, and I'll try to mention his name again, it's Gregory Coppola. Let me put his name in the chat. Author of nx-dotnet. Give him some credits, and he's been very nice at replying to questions and comments about nx-dotnet in the Narwhal community Slack. And I actually just submitted a PR for a minor thing for nx-dotnet, and I created 2 issues that he sounded optimistic about solving. So yeah, he's a nice guy. And it does support this dependency graph, so that's really nice. We'll see that when we generate the projects. And Nick asking whether or not I would be building my projects with a Docker image for each project. Well, I'm not going to discuss custom GitHub Actions today. I'm only going to discuss GitHub Actions workflow. So a CI, a YAML file for a CI workflow just for building and testing. Creating project-specific GitHub Actions or some that are published on the GitHub Marketplace, that's a different discussion. And maybe I'll do a video on that some other time. Okay, let's move on. We have the usual suspects here, TypeScript and prettier. Of course, .NET is not going to be using that, but that's just what comes out of the box with NX. So this is the minimum set of dependencies. Yeah. So what else do we need to do? If I know NX right, we need to set the default base branch to main instead of master. And what else? Let's use main branch as base. And let's look in our workspace JSON file. Has some blank lines for some reason. I'll move the projects down here because that will be changing the most and it will have the largest object. So let's keep the other ones here in the top. And there's not really anything to add here right now, is there? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, what's next? Did I change it? Oh. Organize. Configuration. Yeah. Okay. So what is next? So we set to, when I created using create NX Workspace, I said that I would be using p-npm. And that is nowhere to be found here in the configuration. And that's actually because NX CLI figures that out based on the files you have here. So I have a p-npm log YAML file. So NX will determine that I'm using p-npm. So don't have multiple log files. Then yeah, you won't know what NX will be asserting. Yeah, let's close these files. So now we'll actually add nx-dotnet. Let me just find the website and maybe paste the link. Google skills are not too great this evening. Here it is. Oh, they merged my PR. So now I have the latest commit. Nice. And I'm officially a contributor. Right? Yeah. Nice. So this is the, I think this is the main developer on this project. So yeah, this is the repo. Repo. And it has not too much of documentation yet. It's something he's working on. But this is what we need, right? We need to install the package here. We're using p-npm. Don't use npm, use p-npm. So version 0.4.2, and now it's right here. So I'm adding nx-dotnet. And now, as is the case with kind of the convention for NX plugins, is now we should be able to run NX generate. And it was called add nx-dotnet/core init. If you're used to NX and Angular, the convention for Angular packages is to have an ng-add schematic. And when you run ng-add, the package name, it will call this schematic automatically. But for NX plugins, the default name is init for a generator to initialize this plugin. So let's do that and see what happens. It changed a few files. So it added this one, nx-dotnet.rc.json, has a property of NuGet packages, added something here to git ignore. Only in apps. How about libs as well? And in NX JSON, it added it as a plugin. I'll put it here. I can have projects in the bottom. Okay, so now we initialize nx.net. And now there's a few things to do. First off, hey, Serkan, it's after your bedtime. It's after dark. Okay, so looking into Workspace JSON, there's not a lot here right now, but now we can set the default collection for generators to nx.net/core, since this will be primarily a .NET workspace. So when we do nx generate and then a name of a schematic, it will assume that this is the collection of generators we want to call. So that is one of the options. And then we can set defaults here, generators. And then we need the name of the generators. So we could use NX console for that. So here are all the ones with .NET. And there is an issue right now. It's one of the two that I created. I submitted to nx.net today. Is if we use NX console and we write anything here, it'll do a dry run here in the terminal, but dry run is not supported right now by nx.net, so it'll actually create the files, which we're not interested in. But we can at least see here which options are available. So this was the app generator, so the name of the app project, of course. The language, we have C#, F#, and Visual Basic.net. And then we have a template. So this is, if you have tried the .NET CLI before, you'll say .NET new, and then the name of the template, it could be Web API, could be console, could be class library, and you can list the install ones by saying -L. You can see all the ones I have installed, which are usually mostly just default ones. So this is the short name, is the one we would be writing here. So I'm actually going to say I want ASP.NET Core Web API. So the name is then Web API. So that's what I will be providing here for the template name. And then, of course, we can have a directory. That's if we want a grouping folder. And maybe if you wanted to add some tags, NX tags. And then a test template. So do we want to use NUnit, XUnit, or the Microsoft testing API for our tests? And I'll go with XUnit. And none for no test project. So the kind of the convention for .NET projects is to have a separate testing project, whereas if you're used to, for example, Angular, you'll have the tests in the same directories as the files they're testing, at least for unit tests. But for .NET, usually you have a separate project. And I don't know if it's related to whether or not they are included in a bundle, or if it's just a convention. I'm not sure. But anyways, now I want to set up some defaults for these ones. So let's see how we can do that. Let me split the screen, make some room here. So for the generators, right now, let's take the nx.net-core :app, and give it an object here of options. So for the language, we'll have C#, so that will be the default language. For the template, I will be interested in the Web API template here. And I can't spell, apparently. And then for tags, I will give this the tag of type API. And then finally, the test template will be XUnit. And there's another one that's relevant here, and that's the lib generator for library projects. So let's create some defaults for that as well. So lib generator, and it also has a few, some of the same here. Language, and we'll be saying here test template. And for template, let's go with a class lib library by default. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, those will be our defaults, which will make it a bit easier to generate projects. So let's say we configure the nx-dotnet generator defaults. And so now we must be pretty much ready to generate a project, right? Yeah. Let's open up our terminal, and we'll use nx generate. And remember, we set the default collection to nx.net core. So now we can just use app, the name of the generator. Then we'll give it a name. It will be weather API. It scaffolds a weather API by weather forecast by default. So the name will be fitting. And do we need anything else? No, I think we have the defaults covered. So let's see what we get. And remember to have the .NET CLI installed and in your global path, because it'll be using that behind the scenes. As we can see here, it ran .NET Restore. It added, first it ran .NET New Web API and all these parameters. And then .NET Restore to install the package dependencies. And then it created the XUnit testing project, and ran .NET Restore inside of that. And yeah, I think here it's adding a reference so that the testing project can test or can discover the public API of the weather API project so that it can test it. Updated git ignore workspace JSON and NX. Okay, what is that about? Git ignore. The same again for some reason. We don't need them twice. And NX JSON. Yeah, so it added two projects, the weather API project, the weather API test. And this one is not type API, it's type test. Yeah. And the other are just formatting changes. Workspace JSON also added the projects. So let's go look at that. Our workspace JSON now has two projects. We should also be able to see them in our NX console. Here they are. So for the weather API, we now have build and a production configuration, and serve and a production configuration, and build with a production configuration, and test for the testing project. So we can, let's try one of them real quick here. A production build, please, for the weather API. And it's restoring dependencies, and success. It compiles a production build. So that's as we can see somewhere here, that means a release configuration build, whereas the default is a debug build. And let's try to run the test as well for this testing project. Success as well. One test passed. Very good. So now we know that the executors from nx.net are also working. Let's try the final one, and that's the serve command. And this is a .NET ASP.NET Core MVC web API, or not MVC but web API. So let's serve it, see what happens. So now we have a web API here running on port 5000. We'll look into that in a little while. First, let's look at the configuration here. So if you're used to NX, this should look familiar, but notice that for this is an application project, and it has a build target, which uses the nx.net build executor. And by default, it uses the debug configuration for .NET. And in the production configuration, it uses the release configuration for .NET. The serve target uses the serve executor from nx.net and has the same configurations as the build one. For the test project, it has one target here, build, and it's the same as before, and has another one, test, and the executor is the test executor from nx.net core, this package. So yeah, this is how it works. So it's a bunch of executors for these targets, and then we have the generators we saw before. These 5. We just use the app generator. There's a lib generator as well. There's one for NuGet references, so that's adding NuGet package dependencies to a project. There's a project reference that's adding a dependency between 2 projects, so that they're referencing, one is referencing the other, so that it can use the public API of that other project. And then there's the sync generator, and it is consolidating NuGet versions between all the projects in the workspace, so that they are using the same version for, say, XUnit or Entity Framework Core or something like that. Very good. So let's say this is generate weather API. So let's look into the files. Well, if you have used .NET New before, it will look familiar. But of course here, this is an NX Workspace, so it will have the apps and the libs folders. So this web API project and its testing projects are both in the apps folder here. Inside of the weather API project, it's an ASP.NET Core web API project. So it has app settings, configurations. It has the startup file with some ASP.NET stuff in it, and it also includes Swagger, the what's it called, the Open API UI, and it's using controllers here. So it will pick up all the controllers and route them. So they have put it in a controllers folder. I wouldn't recommend that, but that's what they have done in this .NET New template. So there's one here, the weather forecast controller, and it's extending this controller base from ASP.NET Core MVC. And it has this web API attribute on it, and it's routing to the name of the controller. So we'll have an endpoint that's called weather forecast, and on that endpoint there's a get it accepts the get verb or method. And it will return an enumerable of weather forecast, and weather forecast objects are, it's this data structure. So a date, time, a temperature in Celsius, Fahrenheit, and a summary, which is these. It can be one of these, but it won't. It's just randomly generated, the same as the temperatures here. So it's not real, but you'll get some random data each time you call this API. Program. Yeah, it's just set up. It's setting up a web host. But this is actually using. I don't know if you noticed. I think it was visible here in this app generator. Right? No, apparently not. I was thinking, what's the version of .NET? But that's not mentioned here. But we'll get into that in the CI workflow. So now we have our project. We can look in the testing project here. It just has one test. That's it. And it's using the X unit, so it has a fact attribute on the methods that run the tests. And yeah, I'm not going to change any of this code, at least not today. I just want to focus on the NX capabilities and setting up a GitHub Actions CI workflow. So let's try out the NX dependency graph. And let's zoom in and let's select them all. Here we go. So this is generated from the source files and their dependencies. So it's not explicitly managed inside of nx.json. There are not any implicit dependencies between these projects, as you can see. So this is actually supported directly by the nx.net plugin, and that is enabled here. So very, very nice work. We have the projects listed here and their dependencies, and it doesn't get out of sync because it's managed. Yeah, I imagine it's on the basis of, for example, here in this C# project file. Oh, here we go. Here's the .NET version, .NET 5. But here we have a reference to the dependencies and a project reference to this other project. So I'm thinking this is what they're using to create the dependency graph. Now we'll supply this new project graph API that makes it easier for NX plugins to support this generation of this dependency graph based on the actual source code or the configuration files for projects. So here we can see the tags and the dependency, and it's an application project. So pretty great. Pretty great. So this means that affected commands should also be working now for .NET projects. Let's find the editor again. Yeah, what else? I think we'll be generating the GitHub CI workflow now. And to do that, we have to make sure we have this template, .NET new template installed, because that will allow us to run .NET new workflow. And if you run this command, .NET new workflow, and you don't have it installed, the .NET CLI will actually search for any packages that have a template named workflow, and this seems to be the only one. So it'll mention this name I showed you before. this name will be this name will be suggested for you. I'll just throw it here in the comment. And then we can do .NET new workflow, right? Yeah. So let's see what it has done. It has created one file, and it's a YAML file. It created it inside of the .github folder, a workflow subfolder. This is the convention for GitHub Actions. And then our YAML file, which is the configuration for our CI workflow. So it has a name of build, and when code is pushed to the main branch, except for these files, markdown files and Git configurations, and all these jobs listed here, it's only one job, but this build job will be triggered. There's also this one, workflow dispatch. That's actually for manually triggering this workflow. So there will be a button in the github.com under actions. You'll be able to run this workflow whenever you want to by clicking a button. So that's what the workflow dispatch enables. There's also, we could also add one called, I think it's called pull request. And you could say only pull requests targeting main. We could do that as well, but let's go with what it has generated for us for now. So a build job, and there's a bunch of conditions here. If there's anything in the commit message saying CI skip or skip CI or no CI, it won't run this build job. And then it sets up some environment variables here for .NET CLI on the CI server, so in the GitHub Actions runner. So now we get to the steps of this job. The steps, first it checks out the source code. Then it sets up .NET 5.0. And this workflow then goes and runs .NET restore. This needs to be done inside of a project folder. So it would have to be done for both of these projects here if we do it using the .NET CLI directly. And then .NET build would also have to be run inside of a project folder. And .NET test, of course, in the testing project folder. But we want to use NX because we already saw that we have the target set up by nx-dotnet. So instead of this auto-generated workflow, well, let us just commit it. Generate .NET CI workflow. And let's change it a little bit. So we're going to need Node as well. We have to use NX. So this one is also one of the GitHub Actions by GitHub in the Actions repo on github.com. Set up Node. It's also at version 1 point something. And it has an input parameter called node version. And let's go with I'm not sure if NX supports Node 14 yet, so I'll go with 12.x. And now I want to also on the CI server, I also want to use pnpm. And to do that, I'll have to install pnpm. So it'll be run npm install global pnpm. And now let's install the dependencies for NX. And that is npm install. And now we're ready to run any steps like build and test. We're not going to be needing this .NET restore because nx-dotnet takes care of that. So instead, let's just Well, we could say here nx build what's it called, weather API, but we could also, which I would suggest, we could use the commands here, the scripts from our package.json file, so that they are kept in sync. So instead of this, we will say npm build, and instead of test, we will say .NET test. We'll say pnpm test. So that will trigger these two. So let's make sure they are doing what they should. Let's see. First, there's one thing I want to do. Now we have these two projects. So I want to say default project will be the weather API. So when we run an nx command like nx build, it will assume that we're talking about the weather API. So now this one should be good, but the nx test, we're going to need to specify a name here. So that will be the weather API test. Like so. That should be good. Let's try it out locally. pnpm build. Everything runs great, but you know what? We want to build production by default. So might be able to do prod, but let's use the verbose way, which is like so. And for testing, that's fine. So let's try it again. npm build. Now it should be the production configuration. And I can't really, where .NET build, configuration release. Yeah, so that's the production build for .NET. Great. Let's try the test one. Clear the terminal here, and then pnpm test. Great. So the scripts are working locally. So now we should be able to run it in GitHub Actions as well. So let's say CI, use NX for CI workflow, or it's called the build workflow right now here at the top. And now, now we need to, I need to put it up on GitHub. So let me do that. Let me just set up a repo. Just a second. I'll create a new repo so that you can also have access to the source code. And what was it called? nx.net workspace. NX Workspace for .NET projects using nx.net. Create the repo and set the upstream here, push it. And now it's up here on GitHub for everyone to see in public. And let's see if the actions are triggered now on the first commit. Yeah, it is. No, it's not. Okay. So we might have to just make one commit to kick it off. What could we do? We could go in here and change something. NX Workspace for .NET projects. NX.net. Yeah. Oh, this workflow is not going to trigger for Markdown files, so that's a bit of a bummer. But let's do it anyways. And then what could we change? We could format stuff here. Nothing changed. Okay. Let me go in here. What about here? Save it. Nothing happens. Okay. Change some code. Not trigger commit. Trigger CI run. Let's push it. It's going. And see, it should start running here. And in any time now. Refreshing maybe. Oh, here it is. Okay. So now it's running, and now it will be running for each commit. And I think after it has run the first time, we would be able to do it manually. So let's see. We're setting up .NET Core version 5, then Node.js, then installing pnpm, and then running pnpm install to be able to run NX. Because this is a .NET project, so it's only using NX and TypeScript and all of that to be able to run the NX commands. And that will then be used to run the nx-dotnet commands, or executors, rather. So it should be done within, usually within a minute and a half or so, but sometimes late at night in Europe, it's really slow for some reason. But yeah, what do you think? I'm personally very happy with the progress already being made on this project. It's really awesome. I was considering to create a plugin myself to try out this project graph with .NET, but then nx.net was released, and now it's already in version 0.4. So they are doing stuff. There's a lot in the backlog, and they are taking issues into account. So that's nice. I really don't know why that's so slow. Maybe I'll just refresh. Oh, it's done. That was strange. And apparently it finished in 38 seconds. That was really strange, GitHub. Okay. So why can't I click it? Why am I not able to? Oh, I need to sign in. Oh. Well, let's take a tab here that's sign in. So we can better see. I hope the text is all right. Maybe I'll just zoom in one time more. Okay, so it's set up .NET Core version 5 for the version 5 for this .NET CLI, then Node.js version 12, and we got 12.22.1 and npm CLI as well. Then we installed pnpm. We got version 6.2.5, and then we installed NX dependencies. And as you can see, that finished in 7 seconds. It's really, really fast. Yeah. And this is without any caching, by the way, this one. So now our build step, that's where we're doing pnpm build. So that will trigger NX build configuration production. So that will then trigger the, how's the font size? Let me know if it's not working, if it's too small. I mean, it probably is right now. So let me zoom in one more time. Yeah, so NX build will trigger the build target of the default project, which is Weather API. It will use the production configuration. It's an NX configuration. So that will trigger the nx-dotnet executor, because that's what's configured for the build target of this project. So it's figuring out all the dependencies here that need to be built, because the testing project has a dependency on the Weather API project, so it also needs to be built. I think that's why. So it's running build production for the Weather API, and that is then nx-dotnet is then triggering the .NET CLI .NET build, the project name, outputting it into the dist folder, apps Weather API, release configuration, and what else? Running .NET restore inside of here. And then it created this Weather API DLL. Let's see in our local workspace here. The dist folder, Weather API app. Yeah, so those are the files we would expect from a. It looks like there's some leftovers from a debug build, because this one is part of the debug or development build. But this one is actually a web server in an executable. So we should be able to run this one, and it'll run the web API without any system or OS dependencies. That's some of the magic of .NET Core. It's magic because .NET Framework or any application for .NET Framework had a dependency on the full .NET Framework. So .NET Core is now built for, well, it's built for Windows, right? So it's a Windows application. And so we actually used Ubuntu here. So I actually wonder which executable we got out from here. But yeah, that's something else we could tackle. This one is Ubuntu. So I think it will be generating an Ubuntu executable. If we wanted a Windows executable, we should use the Windows latest image instead. So we can do that some other time. Build went great. What about the test? Same thing. PNPM test is then running NX test Weather API test project. And that is then nx-dotnet is then calling the .NET CLI .NET test, the name of the project, restoring the packages, and yeah, then it's looking up this Weather API project and the testing project, and then running the tests, and one test passed, 0 failed, and the end result is passed. So that's a success. So our CI pipeline was working. Let's go out here to Actions, and let's find our build job. And now look at this. Because we created that workflow dispatch configuration, now we can run it manually, and we can pick the branch we want to run it on, then click Run Workflow, and it'll trigger it again. Here we go. So oh, so it's skipping it? That's a little strange. Why is that? Why is that? Is that because the latest commit touched? No. Yeah, that I don't know. So why is it skipping it? I mean, it does have all these if statements. Oh, so it's only on push. So this template is not really, or wait. Yeah, so it's only on push. So not on workflow dispatch. So something here is this condition is broken. You know what? Let me just remove that. I don't really need that. Remove the condition for the build job. Let's see what will happen then. It's being triggered. Good. And it should complete within a minute. Looking good. Yeah, all good. I think if I refresh now, it should be almost done, right? Yeah, everything passed. So now if we go into Actions and we choose the build workflow and we run it manually, we can see here, let's see, it should be scheduled in a second. Here we go. Manually run by me. And this time it should be running the build job. Yeah, it is. Okay. Very good. Very good. So everything is in order now. Let's just go back and take a look at the code. So we have this manually triggering on the main branch that will work. And when a commit is made, and we should set one up for pull requests as well. We only have one job for now. It's using Ubuntu. So it'll build, I think it'll build an executable for Linux. So we should set one up for Windows as well for this application, depending on where we want to host it, of course. So let's see. Checking out the source code, installing .NET Core, setting up Node.js, installing pnpm because it's faster, and then using pnpm to install the dependencies for NX. And then we'll run the build script from package.json and the test script from package.json finally. And this is this should be familiar if you've used NX before. NX build, production configuration, NX test, the weather API test. This one doesn't specify a project, but that's because we have specified the default project here in our workspace configuration. So the weather API, we're calling this build target. It's using the nx.dotnet build executor. And we saw earlier the serve executor. We didn't try it out, but you can try that out yourself. Just spin it up and then do a GET request for localhost port 5000 weather forecast, and that will return some random weather data. For the testing project, we have this test target. It's using the nx-dotnet test executor. So yeah, now we can use NX to build and serve and test and generate .NET projects. We can use it to see the dependency graph. We don't have to manually keep the dependency graph up to date. We should even be able to use the NX affected commands as well. I don't have multiple projects here. Well, yeah, I guess if we change the file here in the controller, let's see. Let's look at the NX depth graph, or is it affected? Depth graph should also work. Yeah, so it also works because we had one change here, and that is affecting this one. Great. And NX affected test or build. We'll build both of the projects, right? Yeah. Okay, so everything's in order. NX affected works. The dependency graph works. So really nice NX plugin for .NET so far. So huge applause for that project. And yeah, I think that will be it for today. This was the first episode of NX After Dark. Look forward to seeing you some other time. Bye for now.